Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Saturday afternoon. I'm just about to go home. Going out to dinner with my lovely wife tonight, so that'll be good. Just been working on the shop rescue gearbox. I've got it all back together now. The shift mechanism's all in place in there. It's all been polished and made beautiful. Everything's ready and right to go. And I've just done the shim calculations for the end float on these shafts. And I was reading something the other day. Guy Phoenix, who's a contributor to this page, and an excellent one at that. He has some great movies on YouTube. Made mention of the fact that the calculations that I do are very different to the ones that are done with the BMW Measuring System, which I have no knowledge of. The man that taught me using a back cover from a gearbox that had been machined down until it just broke through the back of the bearing pockets, and then he had relieved where these holes are in the back cover. He'd slightly just milled them out and relieved them just a touch so that it would slip on and off without having to be heated. And for years that was what we used. You had to make some allowances for it, and after a while when you were using it, you got to know that if a reading was a certain number, it would probably mean that you needed to expand your shim size by about 3/1000 of an inch. This is a proprietary thing. I bought it from Cycleworks in the States a number of years ago. I've read all sorts of stuff on the internet, and the internet is amazing. But I found it to be pretty accurate. It says it's 750 thou, or 3/4 of an inch thick, and it is that, plus or minus maybe half a thou. It's probably worn a little bit over the years that I've used it, but I'm kind of used to it, and I know how to work it. And basically the object of the exercise is this. What you are trying to measure to get your end float values is the height that these bearings are sitting above this flange. So when you put the back cover on, the two flanges mate, and there's pockets in the back cover that those bearings go up to, and they're captured. You have to heat the cover to put them on, and they're captured so that they don't spin inside the housing. But if you start at 3/4 of an inch, or 750 thou, and measure down to the edge of the bearing, I usually take 3 shots, 1, 2, 3, around each bearing, and I check it if they're out much, and if it's only 1/1000 of an inch or so, I usually take the lowest number, which is the highest spot on the bearing, so that we don't get tight gearboxes. And then I'm just going to pause this for a second. You do the same calculations on the actual gearbox back cover. So this is your input shaft bearing, this is your lay shaft or intermediate bearing, this is your output shaft here. So you use your digital, or I have a digital depth micrometer. I actually have 2 of them, so that if I get anything that confuses me, I use the second one just to check my numbers, because it's an absolute pain in the neck. If you get it wrong, you've got to heat everything, take it all apart, wait for it to cool, recalculate it, bugger eyes around. So if I get readings on my calculation sheets that aren't what I think they should be, I use a second digital micrometer of a different brand. They're pretty accurate, the pair of them, and usually if I've made a mistake, I find it that way. So that's the main digital mic that I use. I use a digital one just primarily because my eyesight isn't as good as it used to be. It has a nice big display. I measure things in thousandths of an inch because I understand them. At this level, I can talk metric and millimeters all day, but I understand thousandths of an inch in small numbers. So when I see a number that's 1/1000th of an inch and it's not looking right, I know what to do with it. It acts like a flag to me. This is the calculation sheet. This is the manual one that I do, and you'll see at the top there's the input, intermediate, and output, and they're the bearing depths, the depths to the top edge of the bearing, where it sits below that 750,000th of an inch plate. Down here is the depth of the housing, and I measure the holes. Now, an interesting thing, the center or intermediate shaft has got a baffle plate on it. I haven't cleaned this yet, but that's it there, and nominally they're about 20,000th of an inch thick. I measure them, sometimes they're out a little bit, but generally 20,000 is a good number, so I allow for that there. Now this gearbox is a late one, and I've found generally that their manufacturing tolerances improved as they got newer, just probably because of the kind of machinery. But so your actual bearing extension is calculated, that number, allowing for the baffle, there's 20 thou there, and your actual bearing extension comes down, down here, comes down to that that number there. Once I put, that's a start point. Sorry, I just confused myself looking through the camera. I've got a spreadsheet set up for this, so that's your beginning point. I'll show you the spreadsheet in a second. So there, your bearing depths there. This one, I checked it a couple of times and it was nearly 604, nearly 604 point something, so I put it in at 604. I got 603. You get that kind of variation. You're talking 1,000th of an inch. Interesting, this one is 623, which allows exactly for a 20 thou baffle. 601. So this gearbox was actually bored in the back housing pretty close. It's actually quite a nice setup. So then what I do is I go to my computer and I put the numbers into a spreadsheet, and I come up with these values. So because I'm looking for a depth down from the surface, I set the spreadsheet up to have a minus. So the 168 thou that we came up with there is inserted as a minus, the same as the 180 here and the 179 there. Right, so that comes down to an actual bearing extension of 592 thousandths of an inch, 600 thousandths of an inch, and 581 thousandths of an inch. That's the height of these bearings, the top edge of these bearings, which is what presses against the back housing if they're touching, above the back flange here of the gearbox. That's what that is. Now then we put in our housing depths, so 604 thou, 623 thou, 601 thou. Once again, they're quite close. They're quite a tidy depth, actually. They're not too bad at all compared to some that I see. And then we insert the bearing extension as a minus value. This is for the purpose of my spreadsheet. And that there gives me the actual clearance between a cold gearbox, between the bearing, the outside or top, if you've got the bearing standing as I have there, and the machined finished depth of the back housing is actually 12,000th of an inch on the input, 23,000th of an inch on the intermediate, and 20,000ths of an inch on the output. Now, it was closer than that when I pulled the gearbox down, but I've actually this time bought a new bearing from Cycleworks rather than from my normal supplier, which supplies an OEM one. And I bought this Cycleworks one because it's a new technology type bearing. It's not a standard make. It's a like a machined bearing made out of some sort of alloy steel by the look of it. Very nicely made, and made in Germany. So I just was looking through their site one day and I was reading the blurb on it, and I thought I'd have a go at it just to see, and it's actually beautifully finished. I wish I'd taken a better photo of it. But I suspect that there might be a slight difference in the tolerance of the bearing, and that's why that's down to 8 thou, which is a pretty close number. But that's the shim values that I'm going to be working to. 8, 19,